there's so much security in being a slave. And freedom means making yourself vulnerable. It means exposing yourself to the risk of failure, which can be scary.
Welcome to the Inspirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Well, how are you guys? How's this week been for you guys?
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything fun, exciting, Father?
Yeah, I think it was a shorter week, right? Was this when we had fall break?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was very nice, having a little break.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris? How's your week?
Pretty good. Nothing really unusual, I think. Just had a few guests around. Just been reading.
No, you've been reading away. That's
what have you been up to? What did you do for your fall break?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. No, I got to go to Dominican Republic to visit a long time priest, mentor / friend.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was really amazing. Yeah, Father Isaiah Barolo. Scalabrinian Order, Missionaries of St. Charles Borromeo, former Superior General. But no, it's cool. 83 years old, going strong on mission. It was really beautiful to go there. We read Dilexit together, which was really beautiful, just from his perspective as just like overall how he saw missions across the world and how, the love of the poor and how he saw that has been such a beautiful gift for the Scalabrinian Order. So just reading that together was really amazing. So
wow,
really
that's amazing.
How's his health?
So his health is doing good. 83, going strong, still visiting houses,
wow.
and, bringing the gospel to different people. I think he has such a gift for noticing the marginalized and just like responding to that. So yeah, it's just really inspiring to see 83 years old and still bring the gospel to different people. Yeah.
One of the most inspiring people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really amazing story. And when you shared the picture of the two of you, I was like, Anthony, I've never seen you have such a big smile on your face. Like he definitely brought a lot of joy and radiance out of you.
Yeah, definitely. It is joyful. It's a good reminder for me to give an image of what the priesthood is, and
right.
Yeah,
I mean, he played the biggest role probably in your vocation.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. Yeah. So really inspirational for me. So yeah, it was really beautiful.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us on another episode of Inspirit. We're back, the regular crew, and today we're going to be talking about the subject of freedom. So I guess let's start with the most basic question. What is freedom?
Well, if you look at the world today, you would say that freedom is doing whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, I would say. I think that's a standard definition of freedom. My body, my choice. There's so many variations of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I guess, how I would say the secular world today would understand freedom. But I think as Christians, we would think differently, right? What do you guys think?
What do you say, Father?
It's a tough question, in terms of, I think I'm very appreciative of the focus on freedom that we find in the modern world because we have to remember the context from which it emerged, and we still see that in a lot of traditional societies where maybe the notion of freedom hasn't been appreciated as much yet. You basically, so in a very traditional society, a person is just 100% assumed to be a product of their circumstances, their family, their class, and so on, right? So, I've seen this in Indian culture. That's why I can speak to it so so freely. Because and not all around, but there are some instances where I've seen that where people will be like, "Oh, that person comes from so and so such background and family," and then even without having ever met the person, they just automatically know everything about what that person is.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter. You don't have to. So that was the whole idea with arranged marriage is you don't even need to meet the person. We already know everything there is to know just by knowing their family.
Right.
So the idea of freedom in the sense that, there could be social context and circumstances and all of that, but that the person is fundamentally free, I do think is an important value to defend.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, there are aberrations and excesses, but overall, I see it as a positive development. It's one of the reasons why slavery doesn't exist in our world anymore today, even though it existed for all of history, because at least legal slavery doesn't exist because it violates that principle that we now know it has to be firmly held, a freedom.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of times, especially when we study philosophy or Catholic theology, the High Middle Ages was such a high point of Catholic intellectual life that sometimes we forget the goods that came afterward. But really, our modern day development of the concept of freedom really came out of the modern period, which means like about 1500s onward. And it's a genuine good, as you said. Like it's advanced a lot of things, especially in the area of like individual rights and liberties. But then, okay, so we take all that together, the good of where socially, philosophically the world has moved to the present, and then we bring in the Christian understanding. What then do we say that freedom is? A lot of times, what we usually hear in shorthand conversation about the Catholic understanding of freedom is we'll hear freedom is a freedom from and a freedom for. So how would we break that down for people?
Yeah. No, I mean, so freedom from is the whole purpose of Christ, coming into the earth, right? I mean, it's to set us free from the various forms of slavery and to sin and to error. Those are kind of like the traditionally held main categories, probably, right? But also in the sort of eschatological way, or in the eternal sense of like freedom from suffering, freedom from pain. Ultimately, that's what our hope is through the risen Christ. So anything that would weigh us down, that would constrict us, that would stifle us from discovering our full self and potential, freedom from.
Right. So freedom from, in a short form, is being set free, delivered from anything that holds us back, limits who we are, anything in that category. And then freedom for really is something that's connected, but is something also very distinct. Even as you're talking about the mission of Christ, there's that famous verse from Galatians, for freedom, Christ set us free.
Mm-hmm.
So that second set us free really is the freedom from. Christ delivered us, Christ liberated us for freedom, and that's that freedom for. And freedom for really is a kind of being disposed, being available to respond to the good. So the height of human living, like the fullness of life, the richness of human life, is not just being preserved from bad things, from death, but it's also being able to reach to the heights of being fully alive.
Yeah, to love.
Right.
Freedom for love. I think that would basically encompass everything. Because otherwise, one of the challenges with what you were referring to, my body, my choice, or whatever, let's say aberrations of freedom that we might see, right? One of the problems is that we say, well, I want to be able to act on my impulses, right? We've talked about impulses a lot. It's come up in our conversations. I want to be able to act on my impulses. But then at what point can you say that you're not enslaved to your impulses? And that's where it gets tricky, where an unsophisticated notion of freedom that I could do whatever I want, that's freedom. That very unsophisticated, non-nuanced version of freedom is very problematic precisely because it leads you into unfreedom.
Right.
Yeah,
Back
I
to
guess
slavery.
Yeah, impulse is one way of looking at it, but what about like if that person thinks this is for the good?
Like a misguided understanding.
Yeah, but that's still freedom.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there's error in there, but I mean, from the perspective of that person, if they're actually trying to understand the good and to pursue the good, but they're misguided, I think that would still be freedom. I mean, but
at the very least, maybe a falling forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
So you would say what is the difference between doing things like however I want versus the Christian understanding of freedom? Is there a nuanced difference that we kind of have?
Yeah. I mean, just take like a practical example, right? Let's say it's Saturday and you don't have to go to school or go to work or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever I feel, right? I mean, after a while, it doesn't really end up working in your favor. You feel kind of terrible because you might just be like laying around on the couch, watching TV for too long or playing, and then you end up feeling terrible, right? I mean, or, sometimes people drink too much. It's like, well, I'm just doing what I want. But then it ends up leading them to a place that they don't really want to be.
Yeah.
So you have to go a little bit deeper in terms of, we do want to follow, maybe you could say we want to follow deeper, truer desires. And maybe we could differentiate that from impulses, or superficial wants and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the things I talk about with the college students here is, when you want to, when everybody's calling you, hey, we're going to go watch a movie or whatever, and you're like, oh, I really want to do that. But sometimes you have to get in touch with the fact that you also really want to be a medical doctor. And when you put those two things together, like you side by side, you might say, I want to be a medical doctor more than I want to go watch the movie right now. And so, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's the problem with just following our wants and impulses. I mean, I think it's not nuanced enough. It's not ordered.
So ordering of the goods, as you would say,
And at the end of the day, there's a lot of connection between, I think, the concept of freedom, the concept of fulfillment, the concept of my own personhood, my own sense of self, if we want to say it that way. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose hopefully what I want to do. Otherwise, it's not really my choice. But is what I want really going to fulfill me? The whole notion in the Christian tradition of how evil really is a kind of emptiness. When we choose the wrong, it does not fill us in the end. It leaves us feeling hungrier, emptier. So, we have a God-sized hole in our hearts.
Right.
And so we're free, and God protects our freedom so much that he'll even let us choose things that are not good for us, because it's so important to him that we want consciously to choose the things that will fill us. And so ultimately it's the good that fills us, that fulfills us. And it's in that also my own sense of self comes more into focus, more into the picture. I start to see, oh, this is the person I really am.
Yes.
Because of what I want and the way that it's in touch with my own identity all start to clarify, they come forward.
That's a great point. Because, to take the opposite example or the opposite side of that, when you give in to impulses and more and more and more, and you become enslaved to them, you lose that sense of control. You actually, your sense of self it gets lost.
Yeah.
It gets scattered kind of across all of those things or something like that. Versus what you were describing, when you make real actions from the core of who you are, you act from that place, you feel more and more yourself.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny how if you think of people who chronically make very unfree decisions, whatever it might be, after a while, there's a sort of blandness that you can almost see in some of these people. And not to, throw any stones, but it's you notice how there's some people who it's they just fall into this groupthink, where they're all just making bad choices together. And it's not just that, interiorly, they're feeling probably less of a person, but even just when you look at them from the outside, they almost become this collective of who are you really? Where's your personhood and all that? It's I'll just go along with what they do. So your selfhood kind of gets drowned out by all that.
Yeah, and when you consciously make these decisions, like you were saying, from the core, you actually start feeling good about yourself. It's right. You do at the end of the day, you feel oh yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel I accomplished something.
So let me ask you guys this. I mean, do you think that most people feel like they're free inside, and what are the factors that affect that? In normal day-to-day life, what affects our freedom to where we're going through life, we're going through the motions, I guess, but we don't fundamentally feel free. I think we talked about one of them, which is where if a person just gives in completely to impulsivity.
Yeah.
Right. That's one form of that.
Yeah, I think like in a day-to-day life, you know, there are these, you know, in one sense you want to make these decisions that are free to your core, but at the same time, when I think about it, like there's all these, you know, you have laws of society, or you have
external factors,
you know, like
the speed limit.
Can't stand that thing. Or like listening to your parents, right? Like, how do we kind of balance that, right? Like, is that freedom or is that freedom? You know, like
right. Well, you can even blow that up further and talk about things like social norms and expectations. Like you mentioned in the beginning, Father, like certain cultures have sort of developed a reputation for the way that they place a lot of restrictions and expectations.
Yeah, and to be clear, I
people.
think pretty much all cultures used to be like that.
Yeah, and all cultures in some sense still do that to some degree and in some way. But some cultures get the bad rap for it more. But not just cultural expectations, but you know, there might be other environments like friend groups, study groups, work environments, church communities, like all these different environments where there's all these sort of collective external factors that seem to weigh heavy on us. I think back to Kierkegaard when he talks about how there's this intangible, invisible they that says, well, they say, you know, we should do this, or studies show, and it's like, but who's the they, and who's, you know, like, who are these people? You never meet who they is.
They is, they is scary.
Right. But that intangible they is always out there somewhere saying, like, they say that we should never do this, and they say that,
or like people,
right?
That's
or people say
people will think that blah blah blah. You know, you hear that
some
growing
people,
up. You hear that growing up from your parents. Sometimes, you know, what are people going to say? People are going to blah 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 blah. And then you also grow up thinking about like, oh my goodness, people are going to. And the problem is that if it was like a specific person, if it's like, man, if I do this, Anthony is going to be very unhappy. I mean, I have some way of tackling that. Right. I mean, I could just tackle him. Look at him. He's just bone, you know. No, you can. But if it's people, or the same applies for a group of people, by the way, you know, sometimes if it's like there's a specific group of people you belong to, and the same thing can happen. It's nebulous. You cannot pin it down, so you can't tackle it. There's no way you can address it.
Right.
You know, you can't even explain yourself. You're enslaved to it. And then the weird thing is like, how does that get to... See, the weird thing is there's probably truth to it, right? Like, for example, if somebody says, oh, people are going to think that you're irresponsible. It's tricky because maybe there is some truth to it. Yeah, okay, if I take a break from college, maybe people will think I'm irresponsible. But it's like weird because...
It becomes like a dictatorship.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of deal with that then? Should we just not care about that, or that idea of like?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing. There's cultures that put too little importance on it, or you know, sometimes that can develop out of these cultures. I should say it's not universal, but usually this is something that's leveled against highly individualistic societies like we have in the United States. But then there's other cultures that take it very far in the opposite extreme, like especially like East Asian cultures.
So you're saying in the individualistic cultures, there's this tendency of not caring.
Like, just forget what they all say. You know, it's not that important. Okay. But then if you look at the opposite extreme, there are societies where the tendency is more towards like, you have to give so much attention to what the people around you say and think. And you know, I think there's sociologists who have said like in cultures like Japan, the smallest social unit is not the individual, it's the family, because the individual person is kind of drowned out. Yeah. So it can tend to either extreme.
And both have its pros and cons, I presume.
Yeah, but it's I think it's also proportional to how much other people carry you and sustain you in life. Mm-hmm. Like, so if your life is being carried by a large community, then it's like, all right, I cannot lose the community's favor, because then I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be exiled.
Right.
Versus like maybe if you're in a culture where, so like when you're talking about America, perhaps most people don't experience a large community of people that are carrying them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like there's people that could exile them.
Right.
See, the threat of collectivist cultures is always exile.
Yep.
And exile is terrifying.
Yeah. To be ostracized.
It's being dead, left for dead.
Well, think about it. Like thrown outside the city walls.
Right.
Left to the vultures and the hounds.
Right.
Or whatever else is out there.
Right. Yeah.
So then we do. Okay. So then we have like these both.
So to your question from earlier, right? I mean, what can we do? What I've seen, like I remember seeing a young adult where he just came to this point where he said, "Look, at the end of the day, who are the people who are actually going to be there for me in my life? Like who have been there for me and who will be there for me? I care about what they think. The other people, I don't care."
Right.
And that was a big breakthrough moment for him because, there's all these people out there. There's distant relatives and what are they saying and what are they saying and what are they saying? It's like, who cares? None of those people ever took any concern for my life or, extended a helping hand or anything like that.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden when I'm in a low point, I have to worry about their perceptions,
Yeah.
So I think that maybe the balance can be found in like, all of us need to identify the different circles of people that are important to us and whose opinions are important to us. I think every opinion has to be a weighted opinion. You know what I mean? Like, so for example, if somebody that I trust and that maybe I look up to or who's a close friend and knows me well gives me some feedback, I don't want to just say like, oh, who cares what he thinks? It's like, no, I want to care what he thinks because that's an important opinion to me. And I don't want to go off and become like a madman. Well, it's too late for that. But then some random person on YouTube or Instagram or something says something. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
To develop that, I think that nuance.
And find who are the people that actually care about you in your life.
Yeah, to add weights to the different types of perceptions, because the reality is people are judgmental and people will have perceptions about you, and you have to learn how to be okay with it.
And people can be very hurtful and mean too, know? And so you have to take all that into consideration too.
Right, but there's a certain degree that we have of allowing those perceptions, judgments to have power over us, or to not have power over us. And I think that we mentioned before that feeling of like when the expectations start to weigh on us, and like my sense of self can almost start to feel like cramped. Like I'm trying to somehow expand my personhood, trying to grow into who I really am more and more. But I feel like these sort of constrictions or boundaries around me. And I think the first step to overcoming that really is to examine more deeply first, who am I in myself? And then from there, like, who am I in relation to all these other people in my life? Because I think the issue with individualistic cultures is that because I only have my sense of self as a frame of reference, I'm only going to see myself as clearly as basically I'm capable. Let me put it a different way. Like, in the Christian life, in our Christian spiritual life, we have God to reveal to us who we really are.
Right.
And he can always provide the correct frame of reference for us. Like when I go to pray and the Lord says to me in prayer, like, you are my beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. I'm proud of you. You matter to me. I want you to be happy. Like hearing that in prayer from the Lord provides me a correct frame of reference for this is the person I really am. And then out of that, I can begin to ask the question, okay, so then who am I really to the other people in my life? And it becomes easier to see like, all right, is this person's opinion weighing too much on me or too little? Like maybe I need to actually give this person more weight, like in my life and decisions. They're very prudent and wise, and like they really love me and care about me.
Right. But you also touched on something really, really important, right? So one is the aspect maybe that I was focusing on, which is like what kind of feedback you want to take in versus not take in, which opinions are valid or like helpful for you. All of that is true. And then the threat was the threat of exile in the sense of not getting support from the community, right?
Yep.
But you touched on something that's actually more psychological in a sense. It's how do I determine that I am good? And I'm searching out there like, man, I hope people think I'm good. And I'm basically, I am good. I'm doing all these things
to prove that I'm good.
Yeah, so that people will affirm me and say, hey, you are good. Yeah. You're wonderful. And it's like, oh, man, what a relief. I'm good. Okay. But that is like a losing battle. But what you talked about, where we go to the Lord and say, Lord, who am I? Like, show me who I am in your eyes. And let that be the foundation of my identity, my sense of self, right? And then you discover who you are in God's eyes as truly, genuinely being good, but it can't just be a concept. It has to be experienced. Then you can engage in healthy interactions with other people, receiving feedback, and all the different kinds of things that we just spoke about, right? Because otherwise, man, that is a lot of, in some sense, you can't even blame the culture, whether it's collectivist or not, because it's me. I'm looking to them. I want them to tell me that I'm good, and I'm getting upset that they won't.
Yeah. And it's because they're limited. Like, they're limited in knowledge, limited in understanding, limited in their goodness even. If you like, look at the rich young man, where Jesus tells him there's only one who is good. Like, even when he calls Jesus good teacher, like, Jesus points his frame of reference up towards the Father. Of course, Jesus is God, but he's ultimately pointing him to the divinity, that like only God can really unlock that secret in us, like can show us like you are good fundamentally. And it's not determined first by any action I take, although it will be determined secondly by the actions I take. But underneath all of that, there's a fundamental goodness that is unbreakable.
To any human being.
Yeah.
So we talked about the role that other individuals can play in constraining, restricting, or even developing our freedom. And we talked about a little bit about how the reference for all that should begin with God. Mm-hmm. But what about for a young person who's staying at home, like dealing with, let's say, family expectations or parental expectations?
How do you navigate that?
How is that? Is that an infringement on that young person's freedom? The rules that are set by his parents, him having to do the duties and responsibilities, or not just even that, like even the parents, like the rules that they set at home, is that an infringement on his freedom? Or how does a young person kind of navigate that?
Well, it's worth, I think, saying a brief word about the difference between honoring parents and obeying parents. So the fourth commandment is honor your father and mother. There are people who think it says obey your father and mother, but it says honor your father and mother. A lot of times honoring your parents is going to mean that you obey them, particularly if you're a minor who lives at home with them, who's dependent on them.
Because the New Testament does say children obey your parents.
Right, children obey your parents. Right. This is where a lot of times the confusion comes in, though, is that at what point does this moral obligation to obey my parents, which even there's qualifications to be made. Like if your parents are telling you to do something that's evil, you have an obligation not to obey them. But then let's set all the nuances aside on that point for a second. At what point does strictly obeying my parents as a fulfillment of the commandments, like when does that cease? And what the church says to that point is that really it comes with emancipation, which it really leaves to civil law to define. So, we can go into all the nitty-gritty details, but the short version is that when that child has reached the age where he or she is capable of making independent life decisions, and has reached what society deems the age of majority, then that's considered, what that society, that culture considers an adult. The church basically says, okay, like now you do not have the strict moral obligation to obey your parents any longer. However, honoring your parents endures for life. And there's still a lot of fruit in obeying your parents after that point.
Mm-hmm.
But
could be.
There could be. But now, like, there's a certain expectation even on the church's side, on the moral side of things, that you're going to make your own decisions consciously as an adult human being.
Yeah, and you're responsible.
And you're responsible to do it.
Although the one thing that I would add to that is, especially in our day and age, is like I always tell young people, I'm like, all right, you want to be independent, you want to be free, right? And they're like, yeah, like my parents are making me do all this and that. And I'm like, who's paying for everything right now? It's like, oh, my parents. You want to be free, do whatever you want while you take all their money. It's just like, I mean, that's not going to fly, And that's not true. That's not just the case with parents. It's in any like bilateral relationship, right? I mean, it's like saying, I have a job, but I want to do whatever I want. It's like, all right, well then you don't have a job anymore,
Yeah.
I mean, so even if you are past the age of majority, I mean, you could be 30, but if you're still under the roof of your parents, literally and figuratively, then I think it changes that fact. But
it does. And it's interesting because today there's so many more grown children, like grown adults, who live under their parents' roof. I think there it gets a little bit more complex, a little bit more gray. Like, what is the degree of social, financial independence between the parents and the grown child? Yeah. But I think that if you just want to, like you said, you could take this with any sort of bilateral arrangement. So even if it's not a person and mom and dad, it's just people living together. There's an expectation that when you share the same house with other people,
you wash the dishes.
You wash the dishes. You share certain responsibilities. You might contribute to the rent, but at the same time, like there's also, it's not like those people have like the same level of reach over your life that you might see in other situations.
Right, but like, if somebody feels that way, that, okay, because of my parents, I'm not free, right? Then these are the kinds of things you'd have to think about. It's like, one, are you an adult? Because if you're not an adult, one thing we have to keep in mind is part of the role, the sacred duty of parents, I believe, vocation, is to set certain structures in place that allow you to thrive, right? Because we need structure in order to thrive. And there's a point in life where you're able to hopefully set that structure for yourself. So for example, you become an adult and you say, hey guys, I'm sorry, I got to go to sleep because I've got to wake up at such and such time tomorrow. You set structures for yourself in order to help yourself thrive. But when you're too young for that, your brain is still developing. Your parents have that responsibility, and it's very, very important. Children who grow up without that, they actually suffer a lot, in their adult life, or even all of us. Like in some areas where perhaps our parents weren't as good at setting that kind of proper structure, later in life we struggle because, we didn't have those virtues developed in us or those aspects of character, right? So recognizing the value of that, like, okay, I'm grateful to my parents for teaching me how to sit down and study at a certain time and so on and so forth. But if you're an adult, you're coming into adulthood, you have to start thinking about, well, have I done my part to be independent? Before I start asking other people, hey, give me freedom, have I done my part to take on the responsibility of freedom? Right? Yeah. Which is to take care of my own self. That's the bare minimum of being a free person. Yeah. You have to start taking care of other people pretty soon. So you have to learn how to take care of yourself and your own needs. Then there's also the psychological dimension where there's a lot of times where a young person wants their parents' approval. They want, they still have a psychological dependency upon their parents, right? And sometimes that continues even into marriage, like what people say, you need to cut the umbilical cord, right?
Right.
It can affect even marriage.
All the decisions get run by mom and dad.
Exactly. Yeah. I need their approval on. So we have to look at ourselves. Same thing what we were talking about earlier with the collectivist societies. A lot of it cannot be blamed on others, right? It really is myself. One of the questions I always ask young people is like, are they forcing you? Are they forcing you to do this? Is society forcing you? How are they forcing you? Is it by physical force or you have to realize that you actually have been given the freedom. It's not that somebody else has to give you the freedom. You have already been given the freedom by God.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of exercising that freedom and learning how to exercise it in a variety of circumstances that can seem stifling.
Yeah.
And just to hit one last point when it comes to parents and children, I do think this is, from the parent side of things, a way that parents end up exercising their vocation child by child. Because you could have 5 kids grow up in the same household. One moves out at 18 and is very like socially, financially, psychologically independent. You could have another child who, lives with the parents till, he's 30 years old. And the needs change. So even on the part of the parents, it's like, how are we walking with each of our children in the way they need to help them launch? Marriage doesn't mean that a person's launched, which is sometimes the temptation. Is like, if we just get them married, then it'll all be good. But it's a little more than that. And some children need more. Some children might not need as much even. But I think from the parent side, that's also like, what am I doing to help set my child up for freedom so that I'm not turning them into being dependent on me for life?
And actually structures and laws actually allow our freedom to thrive in a way, right? Because it allows us to, it orders us towards the good that we need to be ordered to.
Well, about structure, it's really interesting. Many years ago, I was praying with a priest, and in prayer, as we were praying together, he said something to me. He said, structure is always meant to give greater freedom.
Absolutely.
And
that's why we have the laws. I mean, that's why you have laws in church. But
it's a point of discernment, not just for laws, but any structure at all, like a program plan, a retreat outline, like rules of just living in a house.
Yeah,
like,
I think laws are a little different, but yeah.
Yeah, laws, I think, there's more there, but just in terms of structure in a general sense, like social structure, if the structure is helping the people within achieve greater freedom, it's a good structure. If it's not, then it could be the fault of the people in the structure, but that's the point where the people who are bringing it all together have to go back and reflect. And like, does the structure need to change? Does the structure need to be removed? Do the people need to be removed from the structure? It's like if somebody's enrolled in a school, let's say, and that student is thriving in that school, then the school's doing its job. But if the student's enrolled in school and like they're just, the student's life is falling apart and they're doing everything they can, that student might need to leave or, something might need to change systemically.
Yeah.
But, that's where a structure is meant to protect and grow a person's freedom, not take it away.
Right. And I think as an adult, structure has to be engaged with freely. And that's where I think it's different than a law. At least in the American context or a psyche, law is like the bare minimum that we need so we don't all kill each other, and that's not something that you can freely choose opt in or not, right? It's just you have to follow it. But the structure is different. Like, I think that as a fully grown independent adult, you might say, hey, I want to sign up with this, what do they call those people, fitness trainer thing?
Like
people?
A personal trainer?
Personal trainer. And that person is going to put me on a very rigorous pattern. Like, I've got to eat this. I've got to wake up at this time. And I'm freely subscribing to that structure because I believe that through that structure, I'll attain greater freedom.
Right. Yeah.
So, freedom is not antithetical to structure, but I think that all structure, other than like laws and stuff like that, I think have to be engaged in freely. And when you do engage with it freely, it's more productive, much, much more productive. This is the mistake that happens to college students because they're coming from high school. So even though they are paying for their own tuition and for their classes, they feel like they're forced to go to class. Mm-hmm. And so they skip class, they sleep through class, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember, from my own life.
Never happened to any of us.
No, I mean, it's like, and it's like, you don't realize, and wait a minute, I'm actually paying for this. Like, I'm asking them, hey, could you please teach me and could you please subject me to a certain structure that will help me become successful? And then I'm rebelling against the same structure. Right. So that comes from a misunderstanding of both freedom and structure.
Well, as far as law goes, law, I think, really comes down to truth. Structure does too, but in a different sort of way. Structure is more about framed more around convention and practicality, I think. But law can be something very like abstracted. It's really like we're trying to communicate the truth of something in social relations, in our human nature, in the world as a whole. And we're trying to articulate it in a way that it protects relationships between people. If you look in Latin, like there's actually two words in Latin that refer to law. There's jus, which is where we get the words justice, judicial, like all those words. And then there's the word fas, which was the idea of like divinely dictated law. That like it was words that came down from, of course, in pre-Christian Greco-Roman society, it would have been pagan gods. In the Christian understanding, it's like the divine law. It's the law God speaks from his own mouth. So there's this idea that the highest laws are like basically proclaimed from the mouth of God. But then, of course, on the human level, like not every law that's written in America is like proclaimed from the mouth of God. But on the human level, like we proclaim the truth to one another, and that truth is designed to protect our relationships with each other. And that's really like what's at the heart of law. And so any discussion of law that removes the element of truth.
Truth meaning protecting one another and the relationships?
Well, just truth in general.
I think it's tricky because that's why I specifically said the American concept of law, because I think law can mean different things in different places. But what you're talking about, certainly the tradition behind law, right?
Just the notion of law.
Right.
Like, but if you're even in a specific cultural context like America, if we start talking about, well, should we have this law or should we not have this law? And we only frame it around, well, what's practical? But, we don't need to worry about like, what's the truth that underlies this? Like, then we're kind of losing the point of having a law, because it's that underlying truth, that baseline truth that protects those relationships in a just way. Like, if I don't understand why I should treat you this or that way, like if I don't understand that you have these certain rights and protections just by nature of being a human being, then I'm not going to respect those things. And this is why actually we see that as societies advance intellectually, they tend to advance socially as well, because they realize like there's a more just way for us to treat each other. Like we grow in understanding, and the law develops along with that, like in a just society. But if we remove that, then law loses its point of reference. And now we're just creating rules, as you said, just so that we don't kill each other, which is sort of the bare minimum of just like, so
laws is actually meant to order the society to flourish.
There's a sense of order that's founded on truth. But like, if it's only seen in the lens of practicality, then it does the bare minimum, but that doesn't create a thriving society necessarily. Yeah. It just protects from disaster.
Sure. Yeah. With the topic of freedom, I think one of the other things that I always think about is the responsibility that comes with freedom. That when we actually make a conscious decision of this is what I want to do, we also become aware of the responsibility that comes with it. And I think that can sometimes be burdening for a young person. And I think that's why many times I think it's just easier to go with the crowd than actually, take that responsibility. Do you guys get that? Like, do you experience so how do you, if a young person is struggling with that, of like the burden of responsibility that comes with making that choice, that if I go this path, that there is a consequence that I have to face, and that can be scary.
Yeah, like would it ever be more advantageous or seem more advantageous to choose enslavement rather than freedom?
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes, because that's why we do it.
Yeah.
That's why we choose to be slaves rather than free, because there is some benefit to being a slave. And what is the benefit? Predictability.
Avoid responsibility, I guess, the burden.
Yeah, responsibility, but I think it's really just like failure. protection from failure.
Right.
Because if I can say, I mean, even when sometimes people ask you, like the example I gave earlier, hey, can you come out? We're going to go watch a movie. I can't. My parents won't let me. You know what I mean? It's just like there's some comfort that we get from not being responsible for things.
Even just to hone in on that, even think of how often we say I can't.
Versus I won't.
All the time,
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
It's like actually you can, you just don't want to, or you're riding under.
Yeah, you don't want to, and you don't want to take the responsibility of not wanting to.
So you say I can't. Or in America I feel like our thing is you say I'm busy.
Yeah.
I guess
because no one's going to question you if you say you're busy. In
that
America.
way, parents play a good role. Like they can,
But like,
I don't care if you're busy.
no. Like if your parents, you can just blame it on your parents.
in that way.
Or any authority figure. I mean, you can use that, but it's the same thing when people are thinking about their futures and all of that stuff. Because if there's a whole bunch of people, society saying, do this, you need to go study this and become this. If you just agree and go along with it, it's just like nobody can really blame you or fault you for anything, and you're not taking on a risk necessarily.
Yeah.
Right. But if you start feeling like, but I feel called to do that instead, well, what if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's going to point fingers at you and say, you see, this is why we told you blah, 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 whatever. And many other reasons like that. Right. I mean, there's so much security in being a slave, and freedom means making yourself vulnerable. It means exposing yourself to the risk of failure, which can be scary. And that's why, in some sense, freedom perhaps shouldn't be had all at once, right? There has to be a step-by-step process by which you engage with freedom. And I think that should start in our teenage years. I think good parents start to see, hey, you know what? My child is no longer just like an extension out of myself. They're their own person. I can see that. They have some of their own perspectives. It's wild. Like they have a different viewpoint than I do. And to reverence that, that's what I think, gentleness is. Gentleness is reverencing the otherness of the other, right? And seeing that, hey, this is another person. Let me give some space for that otherness to emerge and for them to act in freedom so that by the time they step into adulthood, emancipation, they have a mature use of freedom, and they can overcome a lot of the fears associated with acting freely, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go for it.
When you say giving space, I think that's it seems like such a small thing to do, but it actually speaks volumes to, like what you mentioned, the reverence, the gentleness that one person can show for another. And even the way, again, that God does that with us, where God gives us, I mean, we say we talk about oh, I gave him a long leash, but no one will ever give us as long a leash as God has given us, that we could completely reject him and not want anything to do with him. And he'll still let us do it because he reverences us that much. He's not doing it because he doesn't care, but actually just because it means so much to him when we actually choose him. Yes. And that yes has to be free. That's so sacrosanct to God.
Yes. And, parents should also be aware that only if you gradually give freedom to your children and allow them to exercise that freedom will they ever be able to truly love you. Because love requires freedom.
It does.
And so if they grow up feeling obligated to you or something like that, I mean, they'll still be respectful and all that stuff, but they won't truly love you. And it's a beautiful thing. And I say this not just theoretically, right? But I've seen it in my own life and in the lives of other people and other young people that I've walked with, where they discover their own freedom, as adults, and then they re-engage their parents, realizing that, hey, this is another adult alongside me in the world of people. Yeah. And yet at the same time, they're the people who raised me and all that stuff. And so I have a special honor for them. But that new re-engagement through freedom becomes much more profound and beautiful, than the previous form.
Yeah, it's so much more enriched.
Yeah.
So for any person just watching, or just an adult or young person just watching, if they're going through this struggle of exercising their freedom, feeling the weight of it, feeling the burden of it, what would you kind of say to them to help them out?
I think it's worth examining, why does it feel like a burden to you? Like, why does it feel so heavy to you? Like, we were talking about it conceptually here, but what are you experiencing interiorly that makes having to make these decisions and navigate them like feel so heavy for you? Because
if it's failure or something like that, right?
Right. It could be failure. It could be different people's expectations, the fear of failure, all that kind of stuff. I think that's a good starting point. From there, things might unfold. I don't know, Father, you might have more experience in this area than I do, but I do think it's worth beginning with, like, why does this feel so heavy? Because if we're really living in beatitude and blessedness, Jesus' yoke is easy and his burden is light. So running in freedom should feel light. It should feel very easy, very gentle. If it feels ponderous and heavy and life feels like a burden, then there's something there. There's something inside that might need grace, that might need to be freed even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to acknowledge that freedom is not easy, right? Doing what you want impulsively is easy, but living in freedom is not easy. And so it's something that has to grow and develop gradually, like we talked about. And I think that would be the most practical way in which I would encourage anybody, is rather than thinking about taking the big leap into freedom, right, to take the small step into acting in freedom. Because, like, if you get out there and you say, I'm free, I'm going to just, you know what, I'm not
radical freedom.
Yeah, I'm not going to, you know what, I don't need to go to college. Who cares what they think?
I can do whatever I want.
I'm going to start a multi-million-dollar corporation, and it's just like, and I say that somewhat jokingly, but somewhat not, because I do see that sometimes people make that mistake where they think that everything is just already within their reach and they can just do it, and then what happens is that when you fail, which you most likely will, you become really discouraged and you start going into the opposite extreme, Right. So you have to take small steps of exercising freedom so you can kind of like learn the ropes of freedom and learn how do you manage or mitigate risk and uncertainty, and create structure for yourself that you very much need. But now you have to be the one to bring the structure because you're acting in freedom. And like, there's so many things to discover in the path of freedom. So it's like when you do a small step and you succeed and you have that mastery experience, you gain confidence and skill.
And you actually want it more then too.
Yeah. And then you could take the next step, more confidence and skill, and then next thing you know, you're like a person acting in freedom, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
And it's worth in what you mentioned, that the frame of reference for acting in freedom, for growing in freedom, for choosing to make free decisions, it always goes back to that thing we mentioned in the beginning, which is freedom for, that it's freedom for love, it's availability for other people to love them, ultimately availability for God. Sometimes we'll use the word like disposed to God, like, here I am, I'm ready to respond to you, God. That's like the ultimate context for true freedom. So when we talk about growing in freedom, it's for this. It's ultimately to do things for the good of God and the good of other people. Without that, it's just for the good of myself. And that is a legitimate good, but it's a much smaller good compared to the totality of the good of all people and of God. So, keeping that as that frame of reference is always really important for making free decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the key.
Well, beautiful. I think we hashed out freedom and so many other things today.
Yeah, now we just got to actually go practice this stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now we've got to go exercise our freedom.
Practice what you preach, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Peace.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inspirit podcast. Inspirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.